I'm going to attempt to talk about this curse, and ultimately what this is a story of for me is one of self-criticism, self-responsibility, and redirecting blame until it ultimately comes back into my own control so that I might remedy it. So we talked about cycles and we talked about history repeating itself, and based on the premise that I am my own great-grandfather returned, that makes my son my grandfather in this life. Is my son returned as my son, rather, or potentially returned as my son. And I want to explain how it's not about me as a man, as an individual. It's about me and myself as a family, as an entire house and unit. I haven't thought about me, myself, as just a man for a lot of years now, even before I had children. You break down yourself into parts. You can look up this on plenty of other sources. I'm not going to go into detail. The parts of the self, spiritually speaking. It's not just your body. It's not. You don't just have a soul. Your soul, rather yourself, is made up of many parts. But it goes. That's your inward self, inward parts of the self. But it goes beyond that. You have your outward self. Right. So that includes the rest of your family, your children, your parents, your grandparents, everyone who fits within this cycle, this family tree. Right. It's as above, so below meaning as well. This is what we'll get to soon. Shush, please. So, I had a pretty bad childhood growing up, right? Objectively. Not one of these poor me stories, but I did indeed have a terrible childhood. Most people I know, or anyone I know that's had a similar or equivalent childhood, has ended up dead, drug addict, or in prison. Just degenerate. It's not a lifestyle that normally results in a good outcome. And this is part of the curse, yeah? I would say I'm an exception given the situations. I think I'm a pretty good man. I think I've turned out fairly well. I've achieved a lot in a small space of time. My biggest fear as a man now is not being able to maintain everything I've created, and that it's all going to get destroyed in a couple of generations. Because there's that meme about hard times and strong men and good times and weak men repeating, which is true and observable, but I don't believe it ought to be a rule, an unchangeable rule. I do believe we ought to have hardship to develop as humans and as men. But do we need to be brought to near oblivion every couple of generations just to have a little bit of growth? Because I would argue that my advancements in this generation are barely growth. I talked about in the first video my sacrifices in my life, what I've accepted as part of my fate, and part of my fate is that basically all I'm trying to do in this lifetime is uphold a minimum standard for men in my family in the future. So I'm not expecting great glory or anything beyond just being an objectively good man, husband, father, and steward to my land. But, like I said, it's not about me. It's about me laying the foundations for the bigger self, for the whole family, which includes the children, the animals, the trees, and everything. So what that means is I can't blame the boomers like a lot of people want to do. I used to blame my mother for the situations I grew up in, and a lot of it is from her poor life decisions. But what prompted her to make those life decisions? What was the cause? You found the prickles already. Well done. What caused her to make these life decisions, right? I used to see it as her running away from home, from what I would call a good life. Certainly by comparison to my upbringing, she had a great life. She had